Any case, I'm just going to introduce Frank. He's a personal friend of mine. He's a top shot shooter, instructor. He owns Renaissance Firearms Instruction. He's got training classes all the time that I promote and a lot of people do around the shop. He's well respected, well known, classy guy, and he could give us some basic instruction on, in case some of you have never even handled or touched a firearm. At least we'll have some overview from somebody who knows what he's talking about, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Frank, for coming down.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today?
Morning, good.
All right. I'm honored to be up here standing in front of you guys. I love what you do. I love the whole idea of the Rotary Club. You know, just businesses working together, helping each other, growing the community. That's what it's all about. I mean, before we started, me and Cliff were actually having a conversation about that. And it's the people that are usually doing well in their business. They're not worried about themselves and then what their competitors doing. They're just worried about doing the next right thing. And it's amazing. I love being in a room full of people with that same mindset. So how many people here own guns? Or how many people here, let me back it up. I'm actually going to introduce or start my presentation the same way I would if it was 25 random strangers. And I always like to start off with this question. How many people are new shooters? And by new shooters, I mean defined as folks who have been to the range less than 5 times. Okay, so I want to let you know, and obviously we're at a VOA club right now, mostly gun owners, right, that came here. Generally, it's about 90% of the hands that go up, because the presentation I'm going to show you, especially for today, is designed and geared towards first-time shooters or people with very little experience. So where I'm going with this is, I'd like you to know that I spend more time, my company spends more time with that demographic of shooter than any other demographic out there. Meaning we have more experience teaching people that have never touched a firearm than we do people that have our, third and fourth tier, level operators with military and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we do train a lot of LE, a lot of military, a lot of competitive shooters. My background as Cliff introduced me is of competitive shooting. We have military members on our staff. But the idea is, if you are new, please, you don't have to feel uncomfortable because you're working with people that have extensive experience teaching your skill level. There are no stupid questions. Twice a month I answer, how long is the 2-hour AR-15 shoot? In either those exact words or what time does the 9:30 class end? So one way or another, by all means, there's no stupid questions, and that can never be more true than when firearms are involved. So today's not going to be a huge safety lecture. We have the safety portion down to about 8 minutes, and that's not because it's boring or unnecessary. It's because it's brutally simple to be safe with a firearm, and that's one of the things that we drive through. Today, really, I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about basic safety, basic stance and function of a firearm. Then we'll be down on the range, and you can grab myself or Cliff, and we can help walk you through the loading and the firing of a gun. And obviously, range safety will be there watching the range the whole time. You folks with more experience, if you're looking for marksmanship pointers, I'm happy to give you out a few pointers here and there as we work as well. But basically, if you don't have a part of the curse of New York State when it comes to the gun owner is if you don't have a handgun permit, your experience is going to be limited to rifles today, which is fine. Rifles are just as much fun to shoot. Some people might even say more. I'm one of those people. Rifles come in all different styles: bolt action, pump action, semi-automatic, lever action, and it goes on. We're not going to spend a ton of time on each individual one. That's something that we do in our full-day NRA courses and things of that nature, if anyone's interested. But the key here is just like everyone understand that some way or another, they all more or less function the same way. There's 2 places ammunition could be in a firearm. Anyone know? Anyone want to give me one of them?
Magazine.
Magazine is one. The magazine is the feeding device. Sometimes it's external, like this one. This is what we call a detachable box magazine. And there's one more.
Chamber.
Chamber. So the relationship between those two is very important. And if you understand that relationship, then you'll understand pretty much how any firearm works.
Do you need the magazine today?
Yeah. Believe it or not, I have one if you don't.
No, I got it. There you go.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So I have a quintessential 22 in my hands. This is the Ruger 1022. Let me start with explaining just how we fill these magazines. Whenever we fill a magazine on a 22 long rifle firearm, whether it's rifle or pistol, you're generally going to find a notch that basically you start your cartridge in. You're going to put the rim of the notch, or the rim of the cartridge into that notch, press down, slide back, and then we just repeat that process so we can't fit anymore or we have enough rounds for whatever it is we want to do. All right. We'll just put this to the side. The magazine and the chamber. Chamber, for anyone that doesn't speak gun, this portion of the firearm is called the barrel. Where the bullet exits is called the muzzle. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then in the back is a special cut that allows the round into it. It can only go so far without going any further. We call that the chamber. The magazine, as you saw me fill with ammunition just now, is the device that feeds the chamber. And the action, the moving parts of the firearm, basically facilitate all that feeding and unfeeding and the firing of it, right? So the action is pretty much the heart and core of the gun. So let's just do a quick 101. What I've put in here are actually dummy rounds of ammunition. They're the same shape and dimensions as live ammunition, but they're really just pieces of aluminum. There's no gunpowder or primer or any of the fun stuff in there. All right, so put a magazine into the gun. Imagine this is live ammunition. Imagine the safety is off. If I pulled the trigger, would this gun fire right now?
No.
Not yet, right? Ammunition is fed from the magazine, but can only be fired from the chamber. They're two independent parts. That action links the two of them. So now when we pull the action back, a round will pop up off of the magazine, and then when I let go of it, it's a semi-automatic rifle, the action is going to close by itself, take a round with it, and put it up into that chamber. How about now if I pull the trigger, if it was live ammo? Absolutely, it would fire. When a semi-automatic firearm fires, the bolt is actually not locked into place. As it fires, that same pressure that pushes the lead bullet down the barrel pushes back pressure on the action, and you're going to see your first of two mechanical fundamentals. When I say that word fundamental, it means always true. Instructors do not like that word always. So if I'm saying always, that's one of those pick your ears up because it really must ring home. When an action opens, as long as there's no kind of malfunction, anything inside the chamber will get ejected out. In the case of a semi-automatic rifle, this is not going to stay back. It's going to close. And you see your second mechanical fundamental. When an action closes, it takes a round off of the chamber and takes a round off the magazine and puts it into the chamber. If I squeeze the trigger again, will it fire?
Yes.
Absolutely. And it'll continue to do that as long as I squeeze the trigger. Hence the definition of semi-automatic. Once I have a round in the chamber and a magazine full of rounds, all I need to do is squeeze the trigger. Very easy gun to operate. The unloading gets some people confused. Let's start with this example. Okay. We know we have a round in the chamber. We know we have a magazine full of rounds. I'm going to go ahead and take the magazine out. Is that gun unloaded?
No.
Absolutely not. Why not?
It's got one in the chamber
And how did that one get in the chamber?
by the action.
Right, which happened when I fired that last shot. Okay, most people get that, and you're absolutely right. We have a magazine full of rounds here as well. Okay, let's just put that magazine back in. So let's talk about unloading. We're going to get the one out of the chamber. I'm going to pull the magazine out. Do I have a loaded gun or an unloaded gun in my hand? I have a loaded, absolutely. Someone walk me through that process. When did that get loaded? Well, you saw me clear the chamber, right? You saw me remove the magazine.
Automatically picks one.
Did it in the wrong order though.
All right, the order is very important. When I let go of that action, when an action closes, there's that fundamental in place, right? It strips around off of the magazine. Don't worry, I get those by the hundred. They like me over at Lyman. Strips one off of the magazine, puts it into the chamber. So when it comes time to unload a firearm, the order is very important. And the easiest example I have is filling up the kiddie pool. All right. So I'm back to that condition. We have a magazine full of rounds, and we have a chamber with a round in it. We get ready to fill the kiddie pool. Get the pool out. It's halfway full of water. We got the hose in it. We decide we change our mind. Kids aren't coming over, whatever it is. We want to empty that pool. What's the first step?
Shut the water off.
Shut the water off, take the hose out, right? One of those two things. If I get a bucket and I continue to try to bail out that kiddie pool with the hose running, what's going to happen?
Nothing.
Never going to get there, right? Because I need to stop the flow. I need to stop the supply. And that's what the magazine is. So step one is pull the hose out, right? Remove your magazine. Step two is then you go ahead and bail the pool out, right? When you are finished, comes full circle. Where are the two places where ammunition can be?
On the floor.
Besides the floor?
Chamber and the magazine.
Chamber and the magazine, right? We're going to always check those two places. Number one, magazine. Well, I've taken that out, so that's out of the equation. Terrific. Number two is the chamber. We do that by opening the action and inspecting to see an empty chamber. An empty chamber should look just like a hollow hole. Very easy to see because this is really not much more than a tube. That's all there is to it. Rifle, pistol, and shotgun all work the same way. Sometimes you have internal magazines or cylinders. You know, this doesn't really apply to anyone who doesn't have a pistol permit, but a revolver, the chamber, and the magazine are sort of the same thing. And you'll see that there. Okay, you can see the opening of the barrel. But at the end of the day, when in doubt, ask somebody who's familiar with that firearm. They'll be more than happy usually to help you out. Which brings me to the 3 rules of safe firearms handling. And I have this down to less than 7 minutes. All right, worst thing that can happen at the range. Let's all say it. It's a reality. What's the worst thing that can happen at the range?
Someone gets shot.
Somebody gets shot, right? What'd you say?
Your wife goes with you.
That might actually be supposed to wait.
Even husband to partner, doesn't matter.
Somebody could get shot, right? Absolutely. So I always like to, even an introductory course for anyone that's never touched a gun before, never been around a range, I don't try to sidestep that. This is some serious stuff, it's like most other sporting things that involve potentially dangerous machinery. We have to all be aware that, this is something that, if we're not careful, could end very poorly. All right, so someone getting shot. There's really only one position that you can be in. And we're very vague with this when I say this because I like to provoke a little thought. There's one position where you can be, where you can actually get struck by a bullet. Where is that?
In front of the muzzle.
In front of the gun, down range, right? Down range is really wherever I point this muzzle, right? So safety rule number 1 would be the golden rule of gun safety. We always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. You notice anytime I pick this gun up, it's pointed straight up. Anytime I put it down, it's pointed at the back wall. I've never pointed it that way. Even when I needed to show you folks where the muzzle was, it wasn't, hey, The amendment to that, and I've heard it put a few different ways, but the other way people put safety rule number 1 is always treat every gun as if it's loaded. Sure, I like that one too. The only problem is that assumes a skilled operator, that assumes that somebody knows what a loaded gun should be treated like. I had somebody at the Calverton shooting range point a gun right at my chest and empty it, take the rounds out of it, and he assumed that because the safety was on, that's how you treat a loaded gun. So, I don't go with that one. This wasn't in my class, this is on just a public range. The whole line went crazy, it was insane. But I've been on the other end of a loaded gun a few times, it's not fun. But nonetheless, you always keep that muzzle pointed in a safe direction. All right, barring mechanical malfunction, and that's why we always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. There's really only one way to make a gun go bang. And how is that? Touching the trigger, right? I have a gun that I can bring down later that has a 2-ounce trigger, meaning that if you try to touch the texture of the trigger, it's going to go off. So finger on the trigger at all in any capacity, potentially you can set the firearm off. So 2 things I like to talk about, and that's safety rule number 2. Finger up the trigger until you're ready to shoot. What does ready to shoot mean?
Yeah. You have a target.
Gun is
We have a
loaded.
target, gun is loaded, sights are aligned is what I always like to talk about. Our rear and front sight, we want to align them, or if there's an optic, whatever it is. And once that is on target, let's assume my coffee cup is there, only then does my finger go to the trigger. Guns are designed to naturally let your finger fall to the trigger. All right? Everyone needs to understand that. This is designed to be fired quickly in an emergency, or when I'm hunting, or really just to be comfortable in that firing position, right? So every person here will have the bad habit. It's not a bad habit, it's a natural tendency is really what it is. So just like developing marksmanship, a skill that everyone needs to go ahead and make themselves familiar with or very proficient in, is taking your trigger finger and placing it up here on the stock of the firearm, the receiver, basically over the trigger, not inside of this loop that we call the trigger guard. Very important. Everybody is going to allow their finger to fall here if you don't train yourself and diligently practice to put it here. Okay, 1 or 2 mistakes like that, you never know when the gun's going to go off. Which brings us to safety rule number 3. Full circle. The biggest thing we're worried about is getting struck with a bullet, right? So we really only need to put ammunition in the gun when?
When you need to shoot.
Ready to use it, right? Absolutely. So ready to use is another one of those open to interpretation things. The biggest breakdown to safety rule number 3 I see is somebody loads their gun, and then they realize that, I didn't put my ear or eye protection on, or I need to hang a target. Then they put that loaded gun down on the bench, and that's the habit that gets most people into a lot of trouble. If there's ammunition in a firearm, it needs to be under your control, meaning at least one hand on it, or if it's a handgun, you should either hand on it or holstered, under your control. A few things can happen here. I used to say it was rare. There's a little gun company, they used to make some okay guns. You may have heard of them, Remington. Has anyone ever heard of Remington? Okay. Does anyone here own a Remington 700 bolt-action rifle? It's the most popular bolt-action rifle in the country. Remington's going bankrupt. A large reason as to why they're filing bankruptcy is because these things were just going off by themselves. They've been making guns for more than 200 years. They've been making that gun for close to 100, all right? Just going off. So, if it can happen to Remington, and it can happen to their flagship rifle, it can happen to any gun out there, right? So, if you have ammunition in a gun, all the components are there for it to go off, it can go off. Very rare, but it can. So we want to have our hands on it. The other scenario with leaving a loaded gun around, and we can all, as business owners, relate to this. We have a loaded gun on the bench. We get a phone call, we lose track of time, whatever it is, we're leaving the range in a rush. That's the potential situation to where you can throw a loaded gun in your car and take it home. And how the rest of the scenario plays out really comes down to how well you adhere to safety rules 1 and 2. As long as you don't get pulled over on the ride home, because then you're going to jail. All right. I'm not sure of the sights that we have, but generally speaking, something I always like to talk about is when you're working with iron sights, something very important, especially at an indoor range, both of these need to be aligned. If they aren't, if we don't use the rear sight and only use the front sight, what it causes us to do is to actually lob the round very, very high, and usually it strikes the ceiling or something not designed to absorb the impact of a bullet, which will cause a ricochet. Round coming right back at you. Not fun. Still lethal too. So I always like to make sure everyone knows about that. Optics are made of glass and very fine parts. Exercise care. Quick 101 on ammunition, just so we understand if there's a malfunction to make sure that we don't wind up with something potentially unsafe. All right, what is this device called?
A round? Cartridge.
All right, absolutely, a round or a cartridge. Commonly miscalled a bullet. The bullet is actually part of this. The bullet is the very tip, the projectile that leaves the gun, and everything else stays behind. So when we talk about a few different kinds of malfunctions, it's important to understand the difference. Number one, misfire. The most common one. Anyone that shoots .22 probably will deal with this their first or second trip of the range. A misfire is when the primer gets struck, but for some reason the cartridge doesn't go off. Not a big deal. We simply wait 15 to 30 seconds with that gun pointed down range in case it's actually the second type of malfunction, and we call that a hang fire, which is a round that hasn't went off yet. Boom. Right? If in that process of a hang fire, of that round going off a few seconds later, you open the action or, God forbid, turn that muzzle in an unsafe direction, that bullet is still leaving the gun, and that explosion, if your hand's by the action, is going to happen outside of the gun partially. Okay, again, you don't want your hand there. The third one is kind of the opposite. It's what we call a squib load, S-Q-U-I-B. It's when the primer detonates, but that main gunpowder charge that powers the whole operation doesn't go off. When you have a squib load, you'll have one of two scenarios. Either be very quiet, because the main powder charge didn't detonate, or be very loud, because the case cracked, and instead of that pressure being directed to push the lead bullet down the barrel, it's been directed out of the action. So if you have a round that sounds either very loud or very quiet, very different than the ones that you shot previously, you want to stop, make sure it's not a squib load. The biggest problem with a squib load isn't that the round didn't go off completely or correctly. The biggest problem with a squib load is that it's left a piece of lead in the barrel. If we fire another round, it's literally going to explode. Right? You basically built a pipe bomb, connected your face to it, and set it off. So, if anything sounds funny, let us know. Very easy to take care of. We can clear it with a clearing rod. You know, it's meant to come out. It's a bullet. But nonetheless, it's important to understand these three fundamentals. If you have a malfunction, we want everyone to understand, just orient yourself downrange, right? Where you will normally be. Bang, bang, bang. You have a malfunction. Keep a hand on the firearm. Just put a hand up. The lanes are small. It's only 5 points. Me and Cliff will be able to see you guys very easily. You know, folks that don't have any experience or a little bit. Just keep that hand up. Don't turn to look for us, because back to natural tendencies, right? If you turn, you're going to usually turn with the gun. There's a lot of YouTube videos on there. You don't believe it. That's really about it. Range safety, eye and ear protection at all times. Even if you're not shooting, firearms eject brass. They usually eject it rearward to where you're standing to wait for a firing position to point, a firing point to shoot. Guns are loud everywhere, so keep the ear protection on inside as well. Mount and stance, we'll talk about that very quickly. In fact, this is a small enough group where we can help you with this one-on-one. But essentially, we're trying to find a stance for a rifle shooting or a shotgun that brings us to a most comfortable position. And there's three ways to really mount a rifle. Any left-handed shooters here today? Okay, why not? I'm left-handed too. Okay. My demonstration is going to be right-handed though, because me and you know how to watch something left-handed and make it work for us. Whenever I teach somebody how to go ahead and start shooting, imagine our target's on this wall here. I have them turn their feet 45 degrees and have their body also straight with their feet so that they're kind of indexed to the corner of the room. Okay, and what that does, sorry, this one. That's it. Indexed to the corner of the room. And what that does is that places their shoulder further back, which connected to the gun allows them to bring the gun closer to them. The biggest mistake someone makes when they try to mount a rifle or a shotgun is being completely straightforward to it, and then they find themselves balancing. Straightforward stance actually has a lot of application, but only when it's done correctly. There's a few more steps to that. It's really outside of today's presentation. A 90-degree stance also has some utility to it as well, but again, that's going to be generally more for competitive shooting, long range, small target type of stuff. Again, outside of today's scope. So I like to split the difference when I teach someone how to shoot, when we're trying to do something very quick, and just do that 45. It's very easy, very natural, very comfortable, and at the same time, for the distance that we're shooting, it's going to be pretty accurate. All right. The last thing I like to do is Cliff is so kind to pass around some of my stuff there. We have 9 instructors. We all actually have a different expertise. Mine is the rifle and the reloading. We have defensive shooting courses. Our Marine Corps instructors teach that with us. That's actually, this one has been filled. Defensive 2 is open though. Defensive 2 is moving and shooting. Those of you that are looking to get into it, the NRA basic rifle courses, they're full day courses. All the material you saw here is really just an excerpt of it. I left out marksmanship and more of the firearms function and stuff of that nature. But the NRA Basic Rifle course is really our flagship course. It's the one that we started with. You get a rifle PhD in marksmanship, ownership, and basically everything like that. We give you a shopping list. We send you back to Cliff, and you're good to go. Actually, do. You kind of leave with a shopping list, because one of the things you're going to get there is you're going to get to try 8 or 9 different style rifles, and then learn marksmanship with them all. Copy that over to our NRA shotgun course and pistol course. Those courses are ran the same way, except that we changed the firearm, right, to pistol or shotgun. The defensive shooting courses are about how to shoot faster, and our newest course, the long range shooting course, we're holding this out in Mifflin County, Pennsylvania. We have a range to ourselves where you actually reach out to past 1,000 yards. It goes out to 1040. And we have firearms and ammunition for all of these courses if anybody needs. Take one of these with you. You can get a hold of us there as well. My information's on the bottom. I have some business cards as well if you like the shrunk down format. But yeah, after this, by all means, if anyone has any questions that I can help you with, please reach out. I'd love to keep in touch. That's really about it. Like I said, I had a really short presentation for everyone here today. Any questions before we head downstairs?
Do you have everything we need to shoot? Like literally everything?
Everything.
Okay.
Everything.
I brought you safety
What wouldn't you expect us to have? I bet you we have it.
I mean, I don't know, like ear protection, eye protection.
Absolutely. That's the easy stuff. I mean, we have. I mean, any course in particular you're talking about?
What?
Any course in particular?
No, I was just talking in general.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Right now,
the very
I
basic.
literally nothing.
Absolutely, yeah. You can just show up as you are. I mean, even today, I have enough for everybody. Eye and ear protection, even firearms. Cliff and Paul, thank you. For our long range course, I mean, we have rifles that are capable of hitting a mile. We have 9 of them on the line that you can borrow. That's the only course where ammunition is not included, but we sell it as you need it, so it's not a big expense. Spotting scopes, shooting mats, really whatever it is you need. We have 36 sponsors, and they're very gracious to send, you name it, our way. So we have gear for everybody.
What's the process for a person to get a pistol license in New York?
Are we editing this?
We can.
You want this to be a 3-hour course? No. All right, so the process for getting a pistol license in New York. You're using this, aren't you? All right, let me put the coffee down. The process for getting a pistol license in New York really comes down to which county you live in. The easiest way to go about it is to go ahead, go to your county, or go to your local police department, and they're gonna walk you over to the issuing bureau. That bureau is going to give you a set of paperwork. They're generally going to ask for fingerprints, background check, and usually at least 2 interviews. Depending on where you are, the process can take as little as 3 months or as long as 2 years. Suffolk County is along the longest. They're working on getting more people to help out with that. Nassau County is around 3 months. And New York City, it all depends pretty much on time of year and who you're working with. Good. Anyone else?
Who is eligible for a pistol license?
Anybody's eligible for a pistol license. Your Second Amendment guarantees you that. Any lawyers here?
Are the age
So,
requirements?
but you
though?
have to be 21 or
21. 21 to own a handgun. That's right. 18 for a long gun. So if you want to go buy a rifle or a shotgun, you can buy that today.
And that's a lot quicker. You don't need a license for that. So
Yep.
you just-
Absolutely not. Let me know.
Unless you have any other questions, or anybody else has questions?
All right. I'm going to pack my gear up. I'll be downstairs on the range. Come down. Targets? Do you have targets?
I got targets.
I got some targets. I don't have a